No franchise in MLB history has had a weirder existence than the Marlins. The team has reached the postseason just twice in their 30-year run, and both times they somehow won the World Series. They went from selling out a football stadium to posting the lowest average attendance in all of baseball. They've changed their uniforms like 20 times, but little else has actually changed. The team still stinks. And if you take the shortened 2020 season out of the picture, this franchise hasn't seen October baseball since 2003, which would be the single longest active drought in American sports. Now, over that time, they've had some awesome players, an MVP, a Cy Young, and even Dan Uggla, but for a variety of reasons, the fish cannot seem to break through, and the future remains hopelessly bleak. So how did the Marlins get here? What keeps going wrong? And is there any path forward for the most helpless franchise in all of baseball? So Jordan, why the Marlins?
Maybe the answer is why I'm wearing this hat. Why do I want to wear a Marlins hat? I'm not a Marlins fan. The Marlins are one of the weirdest sports franchises we had. This just goes beyond baseball for so many reasons, for the history that you just laid out. And at the same time, I don't know what the hell they're supposed to do. Even in the past 10 years when we've said, man, the Marlins are in a tough spot, it might be tougher than ever. And I think that's why this is a good time to kind of check in.
You just want to rub their little head. When I think about MLB sometimes, it's like, wow, those 29 big league franchises and the Marlins, there is something rinky-dink about them. They feel like a perpetual expansion franchise. It's like they were created 4 years ago all the time. Here is a very oversimplified version of Marlins history. 1993, inaugural season. They wear pinstripe vests with teal undershirts. A 45-year-old knuckleballer named Charlie Huff pitches the first game in franchise history and wins. But then until 1997, they suck total eggs when they somehow win the World Series behind phenomenal seasons from Kevin Brown, Moises Alou, and Gary Sheffield. So obviously they traded away all three of them by the 1998 deadline, shocking the baseball world and angering their own fans in the process. That was fire sale number one. After that, they went back to sucking eggs for the next 5 seasons until 2003, when they somehow won the World Series again, upsetting the Yankees in 6 games thanks to splendid performances from the likes of Josh Beckett, Miguel Cabrera, Dontrelle Willis, Derek Lee, and Mike Lowell, all of whom were traded away from Miami within a few seasons. That was fire sale number 2. Fire sale number 3 happened in 2012. Now you see, the Marlins had big plans that season. The opening of a fancy new stadium, the name change from Florida to Miami, big signings like Jose Reyes and Mark Burley, a new manager in Ozzie Guillen. But then Ozzie said a bunch of out-of-pocket shit about Fidel Castro for some reason. The team turned out to be bad. Superstar Hanley Ramirez got dealt to LA at the deadline, and then Reyes and Burley went to Toronto come the offseason. Womp womp, fire sale number 3. In the post-Hanley era, a young, promising core appeared to be forming around Giancarlo Stanton and Jose Fernandez, but after Fernandez's tragic death in September of 2016 and a new ownership group buying the team in August of 2017, another fire sale was imminent. And within a year, Stanton, Marcell Ozuna, Christian Yelich, and JT Realmuto were all gone. More on that a little bit later. Now, the upshot here is that 30 years of the franchise trading away all of its fun and good players has fostered a relationship of distrust between the team and the fan base. Surprise, surprise. It's part of why no one comes to the game, and Marlins Park sometimes has the vibe of an abandoned Chernobyl aquatic center. Now, besides those 2 improbable World Series titles, the Marlins have developed very little besides a bad legacy, and now they find themselves with very few fans and a very flawed roster.
Now, the roster may look ugly now, but 10 years ago, the Marlins boasted one of the most promising young outfields in the game, with Stanton, Yelich, and Ozuna all in their early 20s. Better yet, they appeared intent on keeping them all in Miami for a long time. After the 2014 season, they signed Stanton to a 13-year, $325 million extension. Yes, the Marlins really did that. That same winter, they secured Yelich for 7 years and just under $50 million. Alongside rising star Realmuto, the core of the next good Marlins team appeared to be in place. But even though those players were putting up impressive numbers on the field, the Fish didn't find themselves any closer to being an actually good team. In 2017, the direction of the franchise took a dramatic shift when longtime despised owner and art hoarder Jeffrey Loria finally decided to sell the team. A group led by generic businessman Bruce Sherman and not generic Yankees legend Derek Jeter purchased the team in August of that year. The new ownership group did not see a sustainable path forward, with the gargantuan Stanton contract making up a sizable portion of their payroll. Jeter and co. wanted to create the team in their own image. Rather than pushing forward with the pieces in place, they decided to blow it all up and start from scratch. Over the span of just 14 months, the Marlins traded 5 All-Stars, the 3 outfielders, Real Muto, and second baseman D. Gordon, for a combined 17 players. One of those 17 was Sandy Alcantara. Fantastic. That guy's amazing. He just won the Cy Young. Another of those 17 was Zach Gallen, another great pitcher who they traded for Jazz Chisholm, who's fantastic. Great. Sounds good. No? Oh, right. Well, because the 15 other players, only 4 of them remained in the organization. Jose Devers, Daniel Castano, Will Stewart, and Sixto Sanchez. Only Castano appeared for the Marlins in 2022, and this is probably the first time you've ever heard his name. Yikes. On one hand, you could say landing one of the best pitchers in baseball through all those trades is still a win. On the other hand, no, not a win. This did not go very well. Now, to be fair, context matters when reviewing these trades all these years later. Gordon was coming off a PED suspension, the Stanton trade was basically a salary dump, and no one really thought Christian Yelich would immediately become the National League MVP. Most importantly, baseball trades are hard. They are complicated, especially when prospects are involved. But if you're going to completely flip your roster on its head with the entire future of the franchise depending on it, you should probably do better than this.
Of these 5 trades that have come to define the current Marlins team, when you look at what they got back, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the Stanton one is so wild for so many reasons because he won the MVP and hit 59 homers in 2017. We talk about how Judge just had, the perfect walk year going into free agency. In some ways, that would be the perfect I'm about to trade you year. But because he had this giant contract, there were only so many teams that were going to trade for that. At the same time, he was 25. He's Giancarlo Stanton. Like, how do you not get more?
The one that stands out to me, they nailed the Ozuna trade, and he has been the most underwhelming. Alcantara wins the Cy Young. Zach Gallen is like a top 10 pitcher in the world, and they flipped him for their best offensive player right now. They crushed this one.
Because the Yelich one is the exact opposite. To go for huge upside in Brinson and Harrison especially, that did not work out. And in some ways, the kinds of players that they're still kind of going after now, where it's like, oh, if it all clicks, it's like, no, we need certainty. We can't just keep betting on the dream, And even you could say the same thing with Alfaro, with trading for Alfaro as like your catcher of the future when you trade away Real Muto. I mean, that's the thing, man. They took some big swings.
Going 2 for 17 here is not going to do the job.
That said, the Marlins have gone 2 for 17 many times over the last 5 years.
The entirety of the year 2020 was a ruse, a year that so many of us wish we could forever banish from our memories. But for the Miami Marlins, 2020 was, in an appropriately bizarre fashion, a year of joy and a year of promise. The shortened 60-game season allowed a truly mediocre 31-29 Marlins team to sneak into the expanded postseason field, technically ending both their 17-year postseason drought and their decade-long stretch without even finishing above 500. After making the playoffs, they swept the NL Central champion Cubs in a best-of-3 series, and for 3 days, the fish were hot. Now, eventually, a good baseball team called the Atlanta Braves beat them and knocked them out, but it was still one hell of a ride. What burns quick burns oh so bright. Jesus Aguilar smoking a cigar in the Wrigley Field dugout, Miguel Rojas posting a 138 OPS plus, Sixto Sanchez looking like the second coming of Pedro Martinez. It was a quick summer fling, a year that will live forever in the minds of Marlins fans. Jordan, when we look back and tell future generations about the year 2020, the most bizarre year of our young lives, the Marlins are a part of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, surely the Marlins will be the first thing we mentioned.
What was the pandemic like, Grandpa? Well, let me tell you about Jesus Aguilar. And
it is very funny in retrospect for many reasons. At the same time, like, there was something so beautiful and chaotic about it. And there were a lot of moments during the 2020 season, and there were other sports where this had this, but like when we were all stuck at home watching, and the Marlins in particular, I just remember so vividly being like, this is so funny and so cool that for whatever goofy reason, even if it doesn't say anything about how good this franchise is at building a sustainable winner, I love that I am watching the Marlins smoke cigars at Wrigley Field. It felt like such an impossibility that it was all the more delightful, and it only helped that, you know, the personalities on that team, Aguilar in particular, you got a glimpse into what a winning Marlins team can look like. And you look into those two games in Chicago where you had Sandy Alcantara, you know, going deep into the game and only allowing one run, and then in that next game, you know, a 2-0 win with Sixto Sanchez, you know, throwing 5 scoreless, and you know, they didn't need a lot of hits, they didn't need a lot of runs, but there was a way to win baseball games this way.
And that winter, Miami kept the good news rolling, hiring Kim Ng to be the first ever woman to run a Major League Baseball team as the general manager. Unfortunately, Ng's first offseason was marked by a period of transition and inactivity. That fluky 2020 turned out to be a double-edged sword because it convinced Marlins leadership that they were just a few pieces away from actually contending. So besides trading for Starling Marte that winter, they more or less ran things back with the exact same roster in 2021. And guess what? That 2021 team won 67 games. And so, heading into 2022, the Marlins were determined to improve their offense, which went, you'll see. Ah, yes, the lockout offseason of 2021-2022. A weird winter, but a free agent class full of impact bats. Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, Kyle Schwarber, Chris Bryant, and the Marlins got Avisail Garcia and Jorge Soler. Now, to be fair, they also made trades for infielder Joey Wendell and catcher Jacob Stallings. Those moves were significant, but not as significant as the departure of team president and mediocre defensive shortstop Derek Jeter, who resigned his post just before the lockout ended. Now, no matter what exactly happened behind the scenes, it's never a good thing when the most famous baseball player of the 21st century decides that your baseball team is no longer worth his time. And to make matters worse, those 4 headline acquisitions, Garcia, Soler, Wendell, and Stallings, posted a combined 230, 287, 339 batting line in 2022, good for a woeful 626 OPS. Garcia and Stallings were particularly inept. The rest of the offense was honestly just as bad. Jazz Chisholm was electric before he got hurt, and Garrett Cooper had a nice first half, but besides that, the Fish struggled to score runs. They finished in the bottom 10 league-wide in every major offensive category. Think of an important offensive stat, and the 2022 Marlins were probably bad at it. Besides steals, they finished second in steals. Go Marlins. Jordan, what will you remember about the 2022 Marlins offense?
Oh, I will remember it as a tremendous tribute to Felix Hernandez's Cy Young season for Sandy Alcantara, where you watch Sandy consistently give us incredible outing after incredible outing and leave with the game either tied or down by a run or up by a run, and then the Marlins would lose. This is a very familiar tale. Yeah, I think Felix and Sandy Alcantara could probably, you know, share a drink and reminisce over those kind of starts because it became all too common.
It is amazing that 9 times Sandy Alcantara lost, and that is truly a testament to the Marlins offense.
Just how did this offense get so dire? Well, if you're going to fail miserably for years at trade and free agent acquisitions, you better be damn good at signing, drafting, and developing amateur talent. That hasn't exactly been the case. For a team like the Marlins, who isn't going to be in the business of simply going out and paying for the best hitters at the top of the market like Bryce Harper or Aaron Judge, it is crucial to be able to find talent from within. It's clear Miami has done an excellent job of this on the pitching side. I mean, Sandy Alcantara just won the Cy Young, and they have a ton of excellent young pitchers. But at some point, you still need to score more runs than the other team, and the Marlins have failed to uncover any impact hitters to help them do that. On the international side, the $5 million investment in Victor Mesa has been a complete nothing burger. More recent top signings, Giddy Cappy and Jose Salas, have shown more promise as potential role players, but neither screams star by any means, and both are very far from the big leagues. Even more troublesome has been the organization's recent track record in the draft. Since nailing the Yelich and Realmuto picks in 2010, it's been uglier than Ronald Belisario. That's saying something.
Oof.
From 2015 to 2019, the Marlins used 17 picks in the top 5 rounds on hitters. Thus far, only 6 of them have reached the big leagues, the best of which has been Josh Naylor, who was traded long before he even reached the Marlins. It is these failings that loom over the recent top picks of guys like Khalil Watson and Jacob Berry, who we'll have to hope don't go the way of Connor Scott and JJ Bleday, not to mention the likes of Colin Moran or Blake Anderson. The Marlins have continued to try and cover up this developmental ineptitude by trading for talented but flawed young hitters. Outside of Jazz, who's a star, and Garrett Cooper, who is at least useful, it's still a whole mess of unproven guys from Brian De La Cruz to Jesus Sanchez, and most recently, Jordan Groshans and Xavier Edwards. De La Cruz is decently promising, but otherwise, no bueno. You don't spend any money and you don't develop hitters and you don't nail trades all the time. You end up in a situation where your best offensive seasons since you traded away Giancarlo Stanton are Brian Anderson, who they just non-tendered, and Neil Walker for some random season, and Miguel Rojas for a hot sec. It's not great. It's really not great. And as if all of these self-inflicted roster-building wounds weren't enough to overcome, the Marlins are also stuck in one of the most vicious, high-spending divisions in baseball. Nationals suck now, but have completely restocked their farm system and could have new ownership in the near future. While the Braves have the most set and dependable core in the sport, the Phillies were just in the World Series, and the Mets are willing to spend trillions of dollars to buy a World Series. So is there any hope here for Miami? The short answer is probably no. It's a pretty brutal outlook. Now, the Marlins' young pitching foundation should not be ignored. It's not as simple as pitching and defense wins championships, but the Marlins don't need to be one of the best offenses in baseball to be a winning team. As goofy as it was, the 2020 season did remind us of that. So if the pitching continues to be dominant, they really just need an offensive star or two and some competent pieces around them. Jazz could be one of those guys if he stays healthy. Perhaps another one comes along soon. But the track record tells us probably not happening. So maybe you should just go watch Jimmy Butler.
So what does a competitive Marlins team in the near future look like?
I think for all we've talked about in this video and all the discourse around about finding the right hitter, I still kind of feel like they need to lean into what they are doing well and just have the best pitching and defense and the best base running and the best, fundamentals in the sport. Because playing in that ballpark, you're not going to sign a automatic guaranteed free agent awesome hitter, no disrespect to Gene Segura, build a better bullpen than weirdly they have, and just hope you can score barely enough runs to squeak out wild card 3.
They should be the 2015 Royals with brighter colors. Win every game 3-2 or 4-1. Just hope that works in October. But you also need to pray that one of the other 3 teams in your division has a down year. If they continue to win like 95 games, you're just kind of fucked.
Here's what I'll say. I have no answer for how they're going to be better than the Braves anytime soon, but there is a world where the Phillies and Mets, while I can say they will probably keep spending money to stay good, those are very old rosters, and there is a version where those teams are not anywhere close to as good as they are now in 2 or 3 years, and the Marlins, knowing how young that roster is, especially on the pitching side, maybe there's an opening there. At the same time, yikes, I don't know. It's going to be so hard. I mean,
pitching, defense, and praying to the home run statue.
Wherever it is.
It's outside the park.
Bring it back in. No more home runs until the home run statue returns.
They need to do a stolen base statue. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. We're going to be doing more YouTube videos over the course of the 2023 season. And let us know in the comments, what would you do to make the Marlins a competent franchise? Because I have